A number of years ago, I was applying for a position as a dental hygienist, and I had heard that the dentist doing the interviews was doing something super weird. And of course, that really intrigued me. What I learned was that dentist at the time, it was Dr. Steve Ratcliffe, had a very specific interview tool that he was using to help identify if I indeed had the strengths and talents that he was looking for in order to be effective as a hygienist. The way that we worked together and the way that I was coached by Dr. Steve at the time led me to experience myself in dentistry in a way that I know would never have been possible had I been working with somebody else in the same position. So what's happened as a result is I've learned a lot about the art, science of hiring and developing team members. I spent some time with Deb Bush, and we created a whole module on hiring and team retention. Today, my focus is going to be on specifically the hiring component of this entire process. What I'd like to spend the next bit of time with you on is going through what I've developed that I call 10 steps to hiring. So let's imagine that you have an open position in your office. The old model or the traditional way that most people think about hiring is, let me throw an ad in the paper, a generic ad saying that I'm looking for a hygienist, and a whole bunch of people are going to call. I'm going to decide who I like, who I don't like. I'll look through some resumes. I'll do some interviews, maybe some working interviews, and the right person will magically appear and I'll be able to make a great hire. What I want to suggest is there's a whole lot more to it, and it's possible and necessary to be far more strategic in the process in order to increase the probability, and that's the best you can do, that you have a great hire. Now, obviously, hiring is only step one. Developing, coaching, ongoing training is also absolutely important. And for the focus of today, let's talk about the 10 steps to hiring. So let's look first at step number one. Step number one is to gain very great clarity around who is it that you actually want to hire? What's the actual position? What are the roles and responsibilities and job description that's important that you fill today? What temperament are you even looking for in that position? It's a good time to do an analysis of the different personality styles in your office. Maybe you have 10 people on your team, and right now you seem to have far more introverted thinking type styles in terms of personality. And maybe you know that you really want somebody that's more outgoing, more extroverted, more effusive in how they bring themselves to the team. It's a good time to say, where can we as our team create more balance? So that would be step number one in gaining clarity. Step number two is to take everything that you learned about step number one. What is the actual job position? What would be the ideal candidate? And craft an ad. And I like to say a creative ad that may not actually appeal to everybody that's reading all the ads. I like when the ad that is published to the public actually has some filters in place. You have a specific person that you're looking for. And if you write a generic ad and everybody's going to answer it, you have a lot more work to do further down the road. So I say get very, very clear and even put specific instructions in the ad, such as attach a resume and a cover letter. That might seem so silly to you. What I want to do, though, is find out if the candidate can follow simple instructions. If I were to say, I use that example, to attach as an attachment a cover letter and a resume, and instead when they email back, they include their resume in the body of the email, I'm going to have a red flag go off and say, you can't even follow a simple instruction. I want to be able to have a candidate demonstrate that they are indeed computer savvy. So whatever is important to you, you can have that learning take place for yourself early in the process. Step number three, Once you have your bank of resumes, and I do hope that you have a number of them, the easiest thing to do is separate them into 3 categories. I used to say 3 piles when we were looking at print copy, and now so much is done digitally. However you want to separate into 3 piles, absolutely positively, I'm interested in you. Let this be your A candidates, and I'm going to contact them immediately as soon as possible. They'll get my full attention. I definitely am going to have a pile. It's like, no, you've got a bunch of spelling errors on your resume. You didn't follow the instructions. Unless I get desperate, I'm probably not going to contact you. And then you have the ones that land in the middle, your B candidates. Not so strong as the good ones, and definitely they still have your attention. So if nothing works out over here, I still have a plan B in my B pile that I can contact at a later date. Step number 4, when I'm able to contact the candidates on the phone, one of the first questions that I like to ask is, what was it about our ad that attracted you? This is a really fascinating question to ask of the candidates. Here's where I'm going to find out. Were they going through Craigslist and answering every single ad and they really didn't even pay attention to how hard we worked to determine who we're looking for and to craft the perfect ad? Or did they actually pay attention? And are they interested because in our ad, we said that we were a growth-oriented, team-centered practice that gives you an opportunity to really find your best self in this position. Maybe they're interested in the ad because you're an adult restorative practice. I'm looking for them to be able to feed back key words or phrases. Maybe it was location. It doesn't matter what their response is if it's specific to your ad. Oftentimes I'll hear, well, I don't really remember even who you are. I know that I answered a lot of ads last week. That may or may not capture my attention in a great way. Step 5, this is where we're going to have the candidate come to the office so that I can look them in the eye, shake their hands, and get my initial impression. If I fall in love, and I do say fall in love because I want you to fall in love. I would hate to say, well, you were okay. I might be interested in working with you. One of the things that I heard years ago when somebody was in a conversation with me about hiring is they would only want to hire people that they would want to go on a long car trip with. So you may say, is it really important that I fall in love with them? In a perfect world, the answer is yes. And until you meet somebody in person, see how good their eye contact is. Do they have a nice firm handshake? Are they engaging? Do they ask questions? That's when you're going to know if this is somebody that you think you may want to see on a day-to-day basis and be part of your team, hopefully for a long time. Step 6. May happen at the same time as step 5, where you're going to sit down for what I would consider an extensive interview process with the candidate. If you fall in love with them at step 5, they have time and you have time, I would hope you automatically roll into an opportunity to sit down somewhere comfortable, eye to eye, knee to knee, heart to heart. And I will tell you the most important part of step 6 is your ability to ask open-ended questions and listen. Let me tell you about one of the most significant pitfalls that occurs during an interview. If I'm interviewing someone and I spend the first 5, 10, 20, or 30 minutes sometimes telling a candidate about our office, about our vision and values, and about all my expectations, even the most intelligent and emotionally aware person will start to create what's called a chameleon effect. And they will start thinking, yes, I could do that. I can do that. I've never even thought about that, but absolutely that sounds exciting. Instead of having somebody become a chameleon to work their way in to grace and the idea that they could be with you, what's far more effective is to ask enough questions that you learn about what's significant and important to them. What are their core values? What is their philosophy of practice, how they work with patients, and what it means for them to be part of a team? Of course, it's important that, yes, you do share the vision and values that you have, and I suggest that you do that as the interviewer in as few words as possible. I know that a great candidate is also going to be wanting to interview us as much as we're interviewing them, but I suggest that that part happens second and not first. A skilled interviewee will be very masterful at turning the tables around, and they want to be the good listener and they want to ask the questions. And I say continue to turn it back on its heels so that you can learn whether or not they are a true fit, rather than, again, being the chameleon to fit what it is you said you were looking for. Step 7, I love. Let's say that you found a candidate or two, you're very interested in them, they're very interested in you. A hygienist, you may think is a hygienist, and what it takes to do a hygiene position, fulfill the obligations and clinical excellence necessary. You'd think it was all the same and that everybody practices the same. Not true. No matter what position I'm interviewing for, I want the candidate to come in, spend time in our office, to see our processes, to see our systems, to witness our flow and see how it is we work together. I encourage them to take notes on paper. I would literally give them a legal pad and say, write down all the things that you're noticing. And in that list, pay attention to the things that are very similar to what you're used to doing, things that you like. What are some things that are different than what you're used to seeing? Maybe some things that you would already have ideas of improvement on. I want to know if they're paying attention and what they're paying attention to, so that after the observation time, we can spend time together debriefing and learning together. Again, this is an exploration about how well the fit would be. And hiring and developing is always a process. And the more you can look at it as a process rather than an event that's going to happen quickly, the greater the chance that you have long-term success and long-term sustainability. That is hopefully the outcome that everybody wants. Hiring and developing team members can be a tenacious and sometimes a difficult and stressful process. And although there's no guarantee, no matter how many of these steps go well and how diligent you are in the process, there's no guarantee that it's going to work. So increasing the probability really is the best you can hope for. The more intentional you are with every step along the way, the more you're ensuring your long-term success. And this observation time has proven over and over to be very, very helpful prior to moving to step 8. Step 8. The highest performing teams, in my own experience, have a high level of inclusion of the rest of the team in the hiring process. So depending on how large your team is, obviously if you have 30 or 40 or 50 people on your team, it may be prohibitive to have everybody's voice. In that situation, I would encourage you to have your key team members, your leaders from every division, meet with the candidates. Find out if there's a synergy. Is there chemistry? What can you share and what is the candidate willing to share about themselves? Energy, chemistry, it's all real. Are there any red flags? Are there any immediate bumps? Is the candidate asking team members poignant questions? Or is it more gossipy? How much time does the other team member spend saying good things, positive things about past history of employment? Maybe the candidate starts sharing things that would be inappropriate, unfair, judgmental about previous employers. That would be a red flag, again, in my mind. And then I would gather with your team to find out what impressions, what questions, what answers did they come up with while they were getting together with the candidate. Step 9. In the best of worlds, I really encourage you to have working interviews with your candidates. From a legal compliant perspective, obviously you have to pay your candidates, and you may have to even look at this as hiring someone in terms of how you compensate withholding taxes. Make sure that you check with your state laws to make sure that you are compliant with how you're doing this so that everything is on board and kosher. You don't really know how someone is going to be in their position, regardless of how they look on paper or how they sound, until you actually see them working in the designated role. I'm always gracious, and I keep a very open mind and an open heart, knowing that it's difficult to come into a place I've never been before, sort of like cooking in somebody else's kitchen. So you're not going to get the full breadth of what's possible, and you're going to start getting an idea, how are they at performing their clinical skills or their administrative skills? You'll get a sense of it. And I would offer direction, redirection, and coaching at least once or twice throughout the day so that you can start to learn, how coachable is this person? Are they open to learning? And when I coach them, are they able to follow through with the things in the way that I've coached them? Again, this of all of them, I find to be one of the most important steps. Step number 10, when you decide to hire, make sure that you are following all of the rules in your state around legal compliance and your HR policies that hopefully you have in writing. There's a handbook, an employee agreement, all given along with the necessary paperwork to the team member, and it has to be signed. Because especially now, with all of the labor laws and all of the differences from state to state, my job as a coach is to make sure that you as a dentist and as a dental practice are protected in every way, shape, or form from any type of future labor disputes. And once again, clarity is of the utmost importance when you're bringing on a team member and as your team members stay with you for many, many years. The clearer the expectations, the lower the potential for misunderstandings and conflict, especially if and when it comes time for those team members to leave. I hope you found these 10 steps to be helpful for you in your process, and know that there's no such thing as a meet somebody, hire them, and it works out perfect. This is always a process and not an event. Today, I'd like to talk with you about something that I call the practice development pyramid. This actually started with a friend of mine many, many years ago, and it's been adapted and adopted in a lot of different ways. And this pyramid today is the foundational piece that I use when I'm coaching practices. I think this model could work in almost any business at all. I specifically appreciate its application, however, to dentistry. And since that's what we're doing, I think it works. As we look at the pyramid together, I'm going to start with the base layer, or the foundation that, in my experience and in my own life, have found to be most important, and I think the strongest foundation. And that is, what is it that any of us want for our life? I think the days are gone when we work without any regard at all for finding that elusive balance. And I know in my parents' generation, I'm in my 50s, so my parents, my dad would be 80 something years old if he was still alive. That generation and below, it really was their time to focus solely on work and figure out where life might be able to fit in. And today, that model simply is not how we live our lives. So I encourage my docs, as they're starting to create the foundations of building their practices and their businesses, to think first from the moon about the bigger picture. How much time do you want to have off to be with your family, to vacation, to explore other hobbies outside of dentistry? What do you want the whole picture to look like, and where will dentistry fit into that? Where will your business fit into that? So vision for your life is what I really like to have as the base of this pyramid. Moving up to the next level is time to create, and I do say that it's the dentist's obligation, responsibility, and gift to everyone else in the practice and to themselves to be the one to write, envision, and create this wonderful, compelling picture of the vision that they have for the business, for the team, and also for the patients. And why, you may ask, why is it the dentist's job? Why can't the whole team come together to build the vision? And my response to that is, teams typically are going to be dynamic. As much as I want to believe that there'll be team members that stay with the practice for decades at a time, it's the dentist owner that has the greatest deal of not only financial, but also personal investment in the practice itself. So is it okay to engage other people in the creation and development of the vision? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's most important that the person whose name is on the door is fully committed and can fully feel and see where the ultimate vision is going to be for the practice 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. So thinking about the different components of this second layer, vision for the business would probably include profitability, the way that you organize yourself. Vision for the team. How do you want the team to experience themselves when they're at work? Think in terms of how they look, communication skills that you will help them derive and explore, how they will work together in terms of collaboration, co-creation. What are the negotiable things and non-negotiable things that you want to work with your team members? And of course, what is the vision for your patients? What's the type of care that you want them to receive? How do you want them to experience themselves when they're in your office? Do you want to have an urgent care type dental practice where they're coming through and you don't really develop relationships? Or are you looking more toward comprehensive care, relationship-based dentistry, where you want them to go out and scream from the rooftops to bring their friends, bring their family, because this is a place where your patients will come and feel very special and very attended to? The next level of the pyramid is around personal and professional growth and development. So think of this layer in terms of I'm making a personal commitment to my own growth professionally and personally, and I also want to surround myself with like-minded individuals that have a growth mindset, an outward mindset, are learners, doers, activators, that hold a great deal of compassion and a desire to be in service to other people. What does that look like for you? Now, when you look at the 3 layers that we've put together so far, what you'll notice is it's in a dark purple. I call these 3 layers the core layers, or the internal layers, because these are all about what's going on inside of me, inside my belly, inside my heart, inside my own thinking. None of the things in the first 3 layers can be actually touched. Now we're going to start moving up to the actual behavioral and implementation levels of the pyramid. The next one is standard operating systems. That's the term that I use for your operations manual, for the systems that I strongly encourage you to have in writing. So what are these systems? The systems are, how do you have your morning huddle? What does it look like exactly? How is it done? Your team meetings. How do you schedule your patient appointments? How are you answering the phone? How are you billing? How are you collecting money that's owed to you? Anything and everything that happens in your office is a system. Most offices have thousands of systems, many of which have never been written down. So one of the things that I find to be very important, and it's a big part of the work that I do with my teams as a practice coach, is to offer a structure on exactly how to write the systems. So each system would basically say, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And then answer the 5 behavioral questions. Where is it taking place? Who's responsible? When is it happening? And exactly how do we do this? The benefit of having systems is so multidimensional, but the biggest reason to have written systems is so that you have a high level of predictability as much as possible throughout the day. And when there's questions about how things are done, you can literally go to the manual and say, let's see how we wrote this to make sure that we're following it as it's been written, or is it possibly time to innovate, to rewrite, to revisit, to bring it more current with a way that would be even more effective for us as a team. I have found with all the hundreds of practices that I've worked with, been in, and worked at myself, that practices that are committed to working with an operations manual through systems are typically far more predictable and highly effective and have greater performance than those that do not. I want to leave as little up to chance as possible. The next layer of the pyramid is about creating a consistent patient experience. If I have my vision in place for the practice, we're all committed to a mindset of continuous improvement and growth, and we have systems that can be followed on a regular basis, it seems very, very natural and probable that the patients coming in are going to have a consistent experience. And when I say consistent, I know that perfection does not exist. So I'm hoping that all of our systems are operating at an effective rate of 85 to 90% of the time. And that 85 to 90% of the time, the patients that are coming in and leaving would report to people that they love and trust, that they have had an amazing experience, and that they would be excited to be referring those people back into the practice. And that would be when it's time to market. Now, it's crazy when I think about this model, because when I talk with dentists and ask the question, what keeps you up at night? I don't have enough patients. I need to market. Well, it's real easy to get caught up in, okay, let's market. What I want to suggest is that you don't market until the other layers of the pyramid are in place and solid. That may not work perfectly if you're a brand new startup practice. Of course, you have to market earlier than later. When you're looking, though, at the effectiveness, predictability, and the metrics of your practice, I would start looking at systems working and making sure the right team is on board before I would go out for a huge marketing incentive. Oftentimes, the problem is not with marketing, but it lies in the levels below. Marketing includes internal marketing, how well all of your team and the dentist are cheerleading for your practice, promoting the kind of dentistry that you want to be doing. Little things like soft giveaways, baskets, using social media, I think is a sweet combination of internal and external marketing, because so many of us are included and we're seeing each other's faces. And of course, external marketing. Whether or not you want to look at Google Ads, using anything on the internet that would be digital, or do you want to get involved in community service, print ads, higher-end magazines, maybe looking for local businesses that have similar vision and values, such as plastic surgery offices, or I don't want to get all involved in marketing. I think you get where I'm coming from, but that is really, really close to the top of the pyramid. And last but not least, the beauty happens when all of these things line up one after another, and you can look back over your shoulder and in the moment and say, wow, we really have attained success. And at the top of my pyramid, I have it, your success. Because I find that if I talk to 10 people, I may get 10 different definitions of success. And I would encourage you, before you even enter in to the other layers of the model, start with the end in mind. What is your definition of success? Is it around financial accumulation? Is it around personal rewards, that I'm part of something bigger than myself and I really like to give back, and the joy of what I gain from dentistry? There's so many different things that can come together for all of us to say, what is success to me? For me, once I define what success is, it becomes easier to say, what is the vision that I have for my life, and what is the vision that I have for my business, and work my way back up. So this is a beautiful and dynamic model, and I hope you find it helpful.
In our first segment this morning, we're in the Patient Prism studio, and I'm with Sherry Kay, a dental practice coach whom I love. And today we're going to talk about getting off on the right foot with hiring and training new employees. So my first question for you, Sherry, is,
yes, Deb.
In your experience, what are the most important considerations when hiring dental team members? What do you think about first?
The first thing I think about is, I've studied a long time through StrengthsFinder, Don Clifton's work, and I've really paid a lot of attention to this from a couple of different perspectives. One, I've been a team member for many, many years.
Right.
I started in dentistry in 1980, and with what I've seen and what I've learned, I want people to recognize that not everybody is going to fit with a position or with their particular practice. There really is a very small percentage of people, actually, based on research, that demonstrates only about 2% are actually highly talented and would be highly recommended for the positions that we're seeking to hire
only
for.
2%?
It's only 2%.
Wow.
And so practices, dentists, typically get pretty frustrated when the perfect person doesn't walk in the door really, really fast as soon as they put the first ad out, or as soon as they realize that they need to hire somebody. And so when I think about hiring, I think about this whole thing as being a sweet process.
Okay,
A
I
sweet
like
process.
that. A sweet process.
Because the first thing that most practices do when they find out there's an opening or a position, or maybe they're growing and they need to add to their existing team, is they get scared and go to time scarcity and think I have to fill the position, I have to fill it today, and it's got to be with the perfect person. And if I can help individuals understand this more as a developmental process, even as you get clear about what exactly are you looking for.
Right. Starting there.
Starting there. What do you know about the culture of your practice? Is it a super lively practice? Is it very family oriented? Is it very, very intense and results driven? And then how can you find somebody that will complement and maybe even bring a dimension that you might be missing?
Right.
I think about so many things. You ask me, what do you think about when I think about hiring? Well, all right, there's one thing I'm thinking about. Another is how much can you consider embracing diversity?
Correct.
So even if the culture has been moving along in a certain way for a certain period of time, is that still what you want and what fits where you're moving in the future? So I don't want to be reactionary and just fill the spot. I want to be very future focused and think, where are we going? What's the vision of the practice?
And who can help get there?
Who can help get there? Who can help drive you there? So again, we go back to how many people really have the skills and talents that we're looking for, and that might replace who was there before. Like, how are we going to replace Susie? Because Susie was awesome.
Right.
Who's our next Susie? And I'm like, well, before we decide we want to replace Susie, let's look at the position, the roles and responsibilities, the literal job description, and go so far as to say what temperament, what personality style.
And also perhaps what else we need done here that isn't being covered at all. Yep. So we might be surprised when we start interviewing to find someone who has the strengths to also do that.
Exactly.
Right.
For example, oftentimes for an administrative position, I love people that have experience in marketing.
Right.
Or in hospitality, customer service, because that's first and foremost way more important than learning how to submit an insurance claim form or how to create a financial arrangement. There are so many skills that can be taught, but you can't teach talent. And you can't teach what comes intuitively or doesn't.
Right. There's a naturalness about hospitality.
Not
everyone has.
Not everyone has it. Not at all. So those are my initial thoughts when we think about hiring.
So it's not the skills always come first to mind. It's more, what do we need? What do we want for the future? And then what does this person bring in terms of enthusiasm for the role and for engagement with people?
Yeah.
Because it's all about engaging with people, isn't it, in the end?
When I think about every individual position, there might be assumptions that your administrative team members, what some people refer to as the front desk.
Yes.
But I refer to as the administrative person, business manager, office, patient coordinator. What I think of first is how much they have the ability to relate to whoever it is they're with. So that's the default. It's the administrative person that has to have the best people skills. In reality, though, no matter if you're a hygienist or if you're a dental assistant, we're all interacting, relating, promoting the practice, promoting the dentistry, and also have skills that will differentiate us technically from what we're doing.
I'm just going to interject something. It's going to take us a little off track, but we had a conversation this morning, and it's that so often the dental assistant and the hygienist are used to thinking in terms of educating the patient. But really, there's a bigger role, and that's engaging the patient.
Engaging the patient.
Because the patient needs a little bit of leadership for self-choice and self-responsibility and self-exploration and discovery and discerning what it is in themselves they want and why they want it. And there's more to it than educating.
Well, and I think in dentistry as a whole, we're guilty
Yes,
of educating to a fault,
right.
to where the patient has this eyes glazed over, why are you even telling me I'd rather be shopping than here anyway?
And this is news I don't want to hear, so it's kind of like flatlining me.
Oftentimes that's the patient experience. So if every individual on the team commits to co-discovery in their own right.
That's right, co-discovery.
So patients are learning side by side with you. I don't want to be the authority. I do want to be the guide, and I do know a lot of stuff.
Sure you do.
You know, I'm a hygienist. I've worked in the front. I've assisted for many years, and I've worked as a practice facilitator for many years. But none of us in dentistry, I think, are well served when we try to just spew out everything that we know, whether it's about the technical clinical things, or maybe it's about how insurance works. If instead we have more engagement, dialogue. Yes. What do you know about this before I tell you anything else?
Exactly. Before you tell anything. Because sometimes the patient knows it better than you do. They know why they make decisions oftentimes.
They know how they make decisions, why they've made decisions. They know what they want their outcomes to be. And what if we become basically the producers? You know, we've got our nice little John over here. He's producing this video. Yeah. What if all of us saw ourselves as the producer rather than as the director? And there are many ways to engage. The facilitate. And by definition, facilitate means to make easier. Right. So what if all of our roles in the dental team became to facilitate and to make easier for the patient, rather than educating and having this captive audience?
Let's look at this then when we're hiring and we're training. What's going to be easier for us is to find someone who's naturally a facilitator, an encourager, and open to allowing the other person, the patient, bring themselves into what's going on.
That would be beautiful.
How does that happen?
Well, I'm thinking two things. One, there are many people that are natural gifted facilitators. Naturally gifted. And I also believe that facilitation is a skill that can be taught and developed just like holding an instrument or finding a fulcrum.
I agree.
I think the natural affinity is, do they like people? Do they seem genuinely interested? I don't want to narrow dentistry down to where we have to hire all extroverts, because that would be ridiculous. Extroverts are the easiest ones sometimes to come out and to engage with patients.
Well, you and I know that we are seen as extroverts, but we're really ambiverts.
We are.
Yeah, we have to have introverted time as well, or we don't survive internally ourselves. We're not healthy. So, yeah, I agree.
And then someone that has a natural affinity or a natural temperament of introversion, it doesn't mean that they can't relate to people by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, an introvert may be able to take away what's going on in the outside world a little bit easier and faster than an extrovert would, in order to really find an intimate, sweet, and engaging relationship with someone.
To make that connection.
Exactly.
The connection.
Now, there are certain roles, though, when I'm thinking about hiring, where extroverts are more naturally a better fit. If I'm hiring, let's say I'll go back to the administrative role, if I want the voice and the face of the practice to be the next hire, I want somebody that's going to light up when the phone rings and say, I got it. Like, thank you for calling Dr. Sherry's office.
I'm so glad you called. You called the right place.
You called the right place.
Yes.
You know, if I have to train somebody to be happy to answer the phone, that may be going a little bit too far.
Right. You don't want it. You want it to be natural.
Yeah.
That they enjoy doing that.
Right. Just like if I have a position in the office that is to work solely on accounts or maybe be responsible for paying bills, I may want somebody that doesn't have to have social connection in order to feel alive throughout the day. Somebody that really appreciates being in the cubicle.
And the details.
Right. So, and there's so many different.
Because it all depends on what you're hiring, isn't it? It's really dependent a lot on that. But everyone needs to somehow be involved in engaging patients.
Yes. Engaging patients. There are certain things that I find non-negotiable in my hiring process. Somebody that has pure joy for what they do, whatever that looks like. I don't ever want to have an uphill battle with anyone who, if you don't enjoy doing hygiene, I don't want you to be my hygienist.
Okay.
If you don't enjoy answering the phone, I don't want you to be in a position where you're the first line to answer the phone. And if you're not good with your hands and little details of things, you probably would not make a great assistant.
Correct.
So those things are gimmies. The non-negotiables, regardless of role for me though, are, do you love to learn? Are you okay? In fact, can you get excited with change?
Yes.
My friend, Dr. Steve Ratcliffe, used to say, I don't know who the quote originally came from, but I'll give him credit, is that change is inevitable, but growth is optional.
Correct.
And I want people on my team that are excited about growth. Some resistance is always okay. We don't want to change for the sake of change and grow for the sake of growth. So some resistance will say, well, do we really want to change this? Because it really does function at a high level here. Mm-hmm. If we change it, these could be the implications, the ramifications. Yet in life, everything is dynamic.
Everything's dynamic. But what you're saying is it needs to be thoughtful.
Yes.
Intentional.
Yes.
With a purpose. Yeah. And people interested in learning and growing.
Yeah.
Changing. Not always doing things the way we've always done them.
Because it's the way you've always done it. May not be the best temperament.
So I run into this sometimes in a dental office with staff members that have been there in that one place for a very long time. And then a new dentist purchases the practice. The same employees are there. And then all of a sudden there's this disruption and the dynamics are all changing and things aren't in sync and everyone is out of their comfort zones. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while to rebuild all that. And then sometimes there's turnover and then people are forced into immediate hiring faster than they want to be.
Yep.
Have you seen this too?
I see it all the time.
All the time. Yeah. That's really a hard challenge.
And practice transitions may be a segment that we actually really want to focus on.
Why don't we do that
time.
Later? Yes, let's do that another time.
Write that down.
We'll do the transitions.
So
write that down, John.
Back to the other non-negotiable things, though. Some sense of personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. A desire to be in service to others. I don't know that you can work in dentistry without some idea of wanting to be in a helpful environment. And in a conversation we had earlier with Mike, compassion is a non-negotiable component.
Yeah, it is. It's all about healing.
It is,
and helping the person heal from themselves. So, if you're talking about hiring mistakes you've seen, what are some typical categories of pitfalls or hiring mistakes you've run into?
The first thing that comes to mind is a build on something that you and I talked about a couple minutes ago, and that is to have very, very clear expectations about what the position is that you're hiring for. Do you already have literally a job description and an idea of roles and responsibilities? I like to have some flexibility within the job descriptions based on talent. Okay. So if I bring in an administrator and they have a great marketing background, I don't want to narrow them into all you're going to do is answer the phone and create financial arrangements, because if they have a marketing background, that may be something that we now get creative.
And they feel rewarded by.
Exactly, and it's tapping into their gifts and talents. Mm-hmm. So job descriptions, roles and responsibility are huge. And I'm going to preface the next pitfall with the responsibility to the doctor and to the rest of the team to actually have a coaching and development process in place. Every single person will come into the practice with some level of disorientation and some level of needing to be trained and or coached or developed. I'm really good at what I do. I've been in dentistry for almost 40 years. And if you hired me, Dr. Deb, to work in your practice, I would still need to be trained because I don't know your systems and some of the preferences that you have. So having an openness as a new hire, nobody can come in and know everything and exactly how to do everything in any office. In fact, one of the things that happens is if I come in and I'm super experienced, I'm going to come in over here knowing I've been the go-to person for years. I know everything inside and out. You come to me if you have any questions. I know all the patients. I know the office. And there's this assumption that if I could fill that role here, I could come into your office here and I can do the same thing.
No.
But there's actually this deathly you. And it's this big empty hole where everybody is going to fall into either a little bit or a lot. And this U is the learning curve. And rather than having the expectation of a new hire being able to make the jump, I want to have processes in place to set them up to, okay, you're going to fall and you're not going to have the most amount of confidence and you may make some mistakes, and then we'll be able to get you here and it's going to be a different reality than what you experienced here.
How many months ideally does that take?
That's a really great question. I think it's different for every hire. I typically will tell people that it can take up to a year for full integration into a new culture. So
I can say from the business world, it's very similar.
of course.
It takes at least 6 to 12 months.
Now, somebody might be able to come in and fast track and integrate really, really well culturally and technically in the position. And in a few weeks, months too, they may have it just fine.
Especially if everything's in creative mode and they're part of the creation.
Exactly. It's that whole collaborative process that we know in organizational development now is the way of the world for success.
Exactly.
It's no longer a hierarchical model. So going back to answer your question, though, the pitfall is holding on to people too quickly if they're not able to do the job.
Yes.
And there has to be an appreciation for a learning curve, and there has to be coaching and development in place. If there's not coaching and development in place and you're not able to do your job, I may just get frustrated, want to hang on to you, or just talk about you and say what a bad person you are and complain to you, to my boyfriend and to my girlfriends and to the other team members, which is nothing but counterproductive.
Right.
So even if there is appropriate coaching and development and you're not getting it and it's not working, I do believe that most practices will torture themselves way longer than necessary before they decide to make the decision.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk more at some point about offering feedback, having coaching conferences, and from an HR perspective, what's legally necessary to have in place from a paperwork position. Fundamentally, though, I don't think anybody should ever be surprised if they are set free.
Because this goes back to one of our first words we used together, fit.
Yeah.
Are they a fit?
Are they a fit?
And sometimes it takes 2 weeks to find out. Sometimes it takes 4. Sometimes it takes 6. Sometimes it takes longer.
Sometimes it takes longer.
Yeah, sometimes it takes longer.
What I'm clear about is there's no magic bullet.
I believe it. But there are processes that'll get us there.
There are.
And there are thought patterns that'll get us there. How important are background checks?
Hugely important. In fact, I would put that down as one of the pitfalls. So I'm glad that you're bringing up that question next. There's so much to learn in a background check. And I know that we're in a profession that is built on relationship and high trust. And I have story after story after story. I'll share one short one right now. I won't even tell you where the practice was, but there was a young woman. She was working out really well. Everybody really enjoyed her. I think she could have benefited from a bit more training. And the investment when you bring on a new team member is extraordinarily high in time and in money. I don't know that many people pay attention to the financial investment that goes into bringing on a new team member. So this particular team member had been onboarded for, I think, 9 months. And they got a call one day that she was running late and wouldn't be able to come into work, that she would be late. A week later, they found out that she had been incarcerated and that she actually had warrants out for her arrest in another state.
Oh my.
Had a background check been done at the beginning, all of this would have been avoided. So not only is the practice having to go back to square one, I feel bad for the woman.
Yes.
I mean, to be living a dual life and try to be starting over, I feel bad for her, and I have a great deal of compassion. And then I have to put on my business hat
And say,
wow,
that cost me.
yeah, we could have spent $100 and done a background check and found out before we ever got very deep into the process at all that this was not going to be a fit.
Something you said prompted another question. Does every employee need to know HIPAA and OSHA regulations when they arrive for hire?
That is an absolutely. Absolutely.
So can you teach them that, or do they need to know it coming in?
Oh,
You can teach that.
You can teach that, absolutely. I mean, if we hire somebody in from the restaurant industry,
Right.
for example, they may or may not be familiar with HIPAA. They may have some understanding of OSHA. Because I think
agree.
any place that you work has some
Obviously,
understanding of
yeah.
OSHA. In dentistry, though, I think it's so specific because we're working with sharp instruments and we're working with contaminated things. So HIPAA training, OSHA training, in a well-run, well-designed, systematized office, there will already be a HIPAA manual.
Right.
And
This
a way
is
to
what I'm
train
gonna get
that.
to, yes.
And in a properly organized office, there's already going to be OSHA systems and an OSHA manual in place. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, both of those are to have assigned HIPAA officers in place that could take full responsibility for training the new team member.
This is correct. This I know.
Or you can hire somebody
somebody.
in if it's time for your annual training for HIPAA or OSHA.
So it's one of
absolutely.
the first things to learn for a new
Yeah.
hire, to make sure they know it and they'll learn it.
Yeah, thanks for asking that.
In your experience, once again, what expectations do dentists have for their new hires? Now there's going to be a whole range of experiences on this because there's a whole range of dentists and their abilities as leaders or people who educate, train, and hire in their involvement. Sometimes they're not that involved. Sometimes they leave it
The
up
dentists?
to... Yes, sometimes they leave it up to administrator or someone else.
Yep.
Or even a coach.
Sometimes.
Right?
Sometimes.
So, but what is the range of expectations you see dentists have for new hires? Everything to be perfect?
That's a great question. Well, as I mentioned before, we've got this learning curve that may or may not be accounted for in the hiring process.
Right.
The typical hiring process that most people, they haven't even been taught, it's I don't know how this comes up with, but you put in an ad.
Yeah.
You put an ad in the paper, oftentimes a generic ad, full-time dental hygiene position for extraordinary adult restorative practice in Tampa. Mm-hmm. And then people are going to send in their resumes. Okay, wow, you have really good experience. You went to an okay school. You've been doing this for 10 years. You must be good. If you come in and I hire you and I meet you and I like you, I'll hire you. And that really has been how hiring has worked for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. Maybe there would be a working interview. Maybe the candidate would be meeting other team members to see if they like them too. And then the expectation is that they can come in and do their job. Now, maybe they've been using Dentrix and you have EagleSoft.
Yes.
So there might be a little bit of training on the computer system and not very much patience or tolerance for how long it may or may not take for them to learn. So my own experience, I've worked in, I don't know, maybe a dozen dental practices in my actual working in a dental office career, and I've worked with over 300 practices as a dental practice coach. I just don't think that there's, in especially small practices, really great training and development programs in place to set the new hires up for success. And I think that's why you and I are having this conversation.
We're going to have another whole segment on that coming up this morning.
So the leading question is what are the expectations that most dentists have? I think oftentimes the practices have expectations that are too high and unrealistic. That just because somebody has experience, they can pop in from their office to our office and be able to be extraordinary and not miss a beat.
Now we're talking about, we keep leaning our conversation towards administrative, but when it comes to dental assistants and hygienists, are the same dilemmas in place?
Absolutely. And one would think from a technical perspective that a hygienist is a hygienist is a hygienist. Mm-hmm. If they know how to scale teeth and polish teeth, they ought to be okay. And some practices will have very thorough, comprehensive review of medical history every time. Some practices have ones that I work with, for example, have a very specific way to have a preclinical conversation before the chair ever even goes back. Right. So if somebody, even with 20 or 30 or 40 years of experience, comes from a place where you're going to be checking in with the medical history while you're finishing setting up your room, they may think, wow, she's terrible. She doesn't know how to do things right. Well, no, she just doesn't know how to do things the way that you've already learned to do them in your practice. Assisting is a whole nother extraordinary animal because dentistry in itself is so diverse and the levels of technical expertise, excellence, and education is wider than I can reach because I'm only this big.
I can reach
You can
wider,
reach
but
further.
still, it's big.
It's big. So if an assistant is coming from a panky trained dentist, there may be an assumption that she knows how to create a face bow and work in the lab to mount models. But all of these assumptions have to get thrown out the window because everybody, even dentists that have been training at Spear or at Coyce or at Dawson or have not had that type of postgraduate education, how they want things done and the materials that they're using. I can't even imagine today how many different types of composite material there are. How many different bonding agents? Which ones do you need a curing light for? Which ones are you? I don't know. I assisted for years, and I would be scared to go in and act as a dental assistant today.
Just your setups could be different.
Just absolutely. And some dentists, depending on their temperament, might want everything underneath the kitchen sink and every instrument that they could possibly want. And I'm thinking, top of head, a good friend of mine's a dentist in Black Mountain. He has minimal instruments, and it works beautifully in his hands. So the setups look completely different.
Right.
So again, I'll go back over and over to how clear are you in your office as a dentist with what your systems are? Do you have pictures of the tray setups? Do you have lists of all the different things that you might need? So if I'm thinking about bringing in a new hire, I would want to have as many systems over and above the job description.
As many documents
documented, photographs,
checklists,
training modules, videos. We can bring John into your practice to make videos for how you want things done in your office. So the more you're willing to invest, back to that, how do we invest in team members? Some of it, my favorite thing of all things,
I can't wait to hear
this is fun.
I can't wait.
Is that before a new team member comes in, the entire team gets together and says, what are all the different areas that potentially need to be trained or developed? So let's say you've been with the practice for 20 years. Before anything else, I would want you to act as historian. And you get to bring the team member in and help them understand where we've been and the evolutionary process. And you would probably have a handle too on where the practice is going.
Correct.
Maybe we've got somebody that's awesome with IT, used to be a Dentrix trainer, and they're going to be responsible for all things on the computer. And then we've got the sterilization assistant, and she's going to be responsible for making sure that you know exactly how to manage the instruments. The hygienist that's leaving will help you with our clinical charting. Everybody gets to have a role.
And also, by the way, when it comes to recall, our expectations here in this office for the hygienist is that they're going to have to do some personal phone calls.
Exactly. I mean, when I was still practicing as a hygienist, the last couple of years, I was responsible for confirming my own appointment book because we found, I said appointment book, and I said because we didn't have Solution Reach and Demand Force and Light. We didn't have all of those. No. Like we had to pick up the phone, and yes, we were sending postcards, but it was my responsibility to make sure that my patients came. And if I couldn't get to everyone, I could ask a team member for support.
Sure.
But maybe that is part of the expectation is running their own
because of that relationship
system.
And engagement. Yeah. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
So when you're hired, you got to be thinking of that too.
All of the above.
All of
the above. But how can you engage the whole team?
Right.
In order to set this person up.
Your favorite thing is when everyone gets together and they share their strengths.
And the rules are explicit. The roles are explicit over who's responsible for what. So if you're the new team member coming in, if you've got questions about process or vision, I'm going to go see Deb. If I've got questions about my computer system, the first person I'm going to go ask is going to be Susie. If I've got questions about instrument management, I'm going to go talk to Greta.
And hopefully things are documented.
Everything would be documented.
Every system, everything.
And so far as in a perfect world, I would have a spreadsheet or a Word document, or maybe it's a little poster with smiley faces, however your culture would design it, so that I know, have I exposed this person? If I'm responsible for helping you learn, have I exposed you to this? Have I given you general? Have I watched and monitored how you're doing? So is your skill level now?
So now we're expanding our checklists, our documents to actual development of the new employee.
So they're aware of it.
Responsible for certain areas of their training.
And you're not signed off on it completely until you can actually demonstrate that you could teach me how to do it.
I think this is so valuable.
It's huge.
It's huge.
And out of all the practices I've worked with, I can count on one hand the number of practices that will follow through from beginning, middle to end of ensuring that new hires have attained a level of mastery in all areas.
Okay, so who has ultimate responsibility for this? Making sure.
Oh,
Who is that?
Great question.
It could vary from office to office again.
Well, my knee-jerk responsibility is it's everybody's responsibility.
Yes.
That's my knee-jerk response.
It's also the new employee's responsibility.
In a huge
They've
way.
got to be resourceful. They got to reach out and say, I'm not competent yet in this area. Help me out.
They have to have their own voice. They have to be able to claim their own learning. And I don't want to have this conversation about setting expectations, guiding, training, coaching without the responsibility of the dentist.
Exactly. The dentist is involved.
And they have to be involved.
They're the owners.
They're not
principals.
absolved of responsibility because they have a team that knows the systems better than they do. Because the one thing that oftentimes is missing, depending on the position, is the dentist checking in on a regular basis, having the coaching conferences, and finding out not only technically how this new hire is doing, but also emotionally. Like, how are we doing as a culture bringing you in?
And how valued do you feel?
Yeah. And what could we do better?
Right.
The one thing that I love to say to new team members and to the whole team is the greatest teacher is the new hire. They're going to teach you about their learning style. They're going to teach you about what's working and what's not working in terms of how are they grasping, how much are they grasping, where are their voids? Are they going home excited or are they going home all filled with anxiety? Are they coming in the morning excited or are they coming in with a place of dread because they're still down in this hole and they haven't started to be able to claim
Right.
enough
Claim's
successes?
a good word. That's a good word.
Thank you.
That's a good word. I like that one.
I like that one too.
That's good. But how do you motivate a new or existing integrated employee to always be present, to always be mindful, to always be doing their best? Like Scouts Honor, I do my best. How do you motivate them to always be at their best at work?
Deb, you're asking a huge question. And my knee-jerk response is nobody can motivate another person, period.
Okay.
Like, period.
That's fair. Let's hear about it.
I can't motivate them. There's actually a book. Am I allowed to plug books while we're doing this?
Sure, go for it.
Why Motivating People Doesn't Work and What Does.
Okay.
So the idea is how can I spark another person's internal motivation so that they can motivate themselves?
Okay.
That may sound like semantics, but it's real. I mean, years ago, before I started really understanding the psychology and the science, the neuroscience of behavior, I would think I was a failure if I couldn't motivate somebody else to do something. And now I recognize my role is very, very different. My role is simply to create a container that has the potential, let me say that differently, that can increase the probability.
Okay, so we're talking about a container or an environment.
That
sparks motivation from inside.
Yeah. All I can do is increase the probability that somebody will be able to do something in the best way possible.
Interesting.
That's my role.
Interesting. Do you reward?
Well, there's according to the most current research and the books that I've been reading, carrots and sticks don't work.
Interesting.
So, I mean, that's how we were raised. That's how I was raised.
Yeah, we're all raised that way.
Do bad, you're punished. Do good, this is what you get. I don't even think this is a millennial thing. I think this is finally understanding the inner mechanics of psychology and motivation. That says, you know, what works is understanding people's core values and understanding what makes individuals feel connected and part of something greater than themselves.
Okay, now let's spend time on that, because that is huge.
It is huge.
Feeling connected and part of something greater than themselves, because that's always how I feel when I'm really engaged in my work.
Yeah.
That's always where I'm at my happy place.
Yeah, and you sparkle when you're talking about it.
I love
Let me interview you about these questions.
No, it's your turn today. I love it.
But you lit up.
Yeah, I did light up.
Just that whole idea of connection.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
So this is where I connect, because in the business environment, it's also true. If you feel like if you know the bigger picture, you're headed towards something, the values and principles and everything that you're all in sync with, more or less.
Yep.
And you're all headed off somewhere and you're all working towards this goal and you're making progress, it feels so good.
It does. And that's why foundationally, when I think about, and the word that's missing for me with this segment, it's not only about hiring and retaining, it's hiring and developing team members. In my own consciousness, that's how I work with teams. Because I do see, just like I think patients are in a developmental process,
Right.
not in a walk-in ready to do treatment as much as we're going to help develop their understanding, their knowledge, their desires, and their appreciation for what's possible.
Right.
It's the same thing with
Same
team
thing.
members. So fundamentally, it all begins with the doctor or the doctors of the practice creating a vision, not just a checklist of where they want to go and goals that they want to hit, but truly an inspiring, and I love the word compelling vision. Compelling vision that sets the stage for the team saying, I want to go there.
Yeah, I want to help.
I want to help. I want to be part of it. I don't want to just be a passerby sitting on your bus while you're driving
Right.
to this vision. I want to figure out what my role is so that I can really be an integral part of helping all of us get there.
And I also want to see us get there. In other words, I want to see the movement. I want to be informed as it's happening, as certain things are starting to work.
Yes.
I don't want to be left in the dark or not told.
Because exclusion
Right.
is going to elicit the exact opposite response of what we're talking about in terms
Shutting
of connectedness and engagement and feeling part of something bigger.
Right.
So when I think about retention of team members, I take a high level of responsibility for what is the culture? What's the culture creating, saying, feeling like? How are the individuals on the team experiencing themselves? Now, I can't take responsibility for everybody that feels good or everybody that feels bad.
Correct.
What I can take responsibility for, and I want to encourage throughout the culture, is that we are all influencing each other all day, every day.
All the time.
My friend Brian DeRoche says, you can't not influence.
That's true.
You can't not.
it.
So if I'm going to take responsibility and I know I am influencing, then doesn't it make sense for me to take that responsibility and think, how do I want to influence and what can I be deliberate and intentional about so that in the best of all worlds, the intention that I have is actually going to impact you in the way that I hope for, and it's going to be positive.
So this comes back to being seen in my book.
It does.
Let's talk about being seen, being recognized. Because if you're a team member and you're all aspiring and you're all working towards something, if you don't feel what you're doing is seen, it's also devaluing and stops motivation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been true for many, many years, and it continues to be true that the number one reason that anybody will leave their place of employment is because they feel undervalued or underappreciated. It doesn't mean that it's our obligation as owners to walk around, patting you on the back and telling you how amazing you are all day long. I do think it increases the level of responsibility that I get to know you well enough that I know how can I see you?
Right. Now this is excellent. Yeah, let's go down that road for a while.
So this is an appreciation of personality style, behavior style. I love the book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yes.
And there's actually a variation of that, The 5 Love Languages at Work. So if all of us were to take the time to really get to know each other and have appreciation for the things that raise us up and the things that knock us down, we can learn to be not only sensitive but gracious in how we give to each other and offer each other in terms of feedback, appreciation, recognition,
or forgiveness,
understanding, and we'll bring back compassion.
We have compassion. There it goes.
We're not robots.
We're human beings,
and in all relationships, we are going to bump into each other. The greatest practices, the greatest teams, the greatest cultures are not absent of conflict or absent of bumping. What makes them high performing is actually their ability to embrace the conflict, be in the conversation, be in the competing
To actually-
values, and be in the competing passions with appreciation for each other.
But this goes back to collaboration, because some people feel like they're true collaborators. They lose out on that piece of it, to be in conflict. In other words, if you have no power in that conversation.
So if I don't think you're going to hear me,
Exactly.
then I lose my sense of being
Really
part of the
that's
group,
right.
and I don't think I can be part of the collaboration.
Right.
So what does inclusion like?
There we go. Yes.
And how can any organization, and in dentistry it's interesting, I'm thinking first and foremost of the smaller practices. Maybe there's 5 people or 10 people on the team. It's pretty easy for everyone, if there's intention, to feel seen, to feel heard. And when somebody does not feel seen or heard, it's way more obvious because there's nowhere to hide in a small group.
That's true. Their face changes. You see them.
You see them, and it's impossible not to notice. So back,
Emotional changes are noticed.
yeah, and going back to, you can't not influence. If there's 1 out of 7 that's like really down, pulled out, that has a negative impact
Sure does.
on everyone around.
It does.
So what's their personal responsibility? And then what is the responsibility of the rest of the group? Because it's always multidimensional in terms of the responsibility and the choice points for when, how, if to intervene to shift energy around the collaborative process. And for me, that's the beauty of being on a team, having these kinds of conversations in a collaborative way. I'm not going to ever say anything to you with the intention to hurt your feelings. I'm going to say something to you with the intention to help all of us, with you being one of them, to go down here to this beautiful vision that the doctor has created for who we are, who we can become.
And this goes back to creating that space for someone to be self-motivated, right?
It does.
It does.
Because I want to be a better person so that I can be in better service to you.
Exactly.
I want to find the very best version of me. So I think that the magic bullet here in terms of what was your word? Retaining, and I say developing team members lies 100% in 2 things. 1, having the right person who has the similar core values and desires that we discussed in segment 1, and 2, having this developing culture of continuous improvement and consistent multi-directional feedback in a safe environment to allow people to find their best selves. We all want and are hungry for our best selves to be emerging. Nobody wakes up in the morning in health and says, I want to be a grumpy, horrible person who doesn't get along with my team and takes bad care of my patients. Nobody does that.
That's right. They don't
And I
do
preface in health because I'm assuming that anybody that's watching this and on our teams are emotionally stable and healthy.
Yeah, this is good. This is a good place to end this segment.
Okay.
Okay,
This was
thank you,
fun.
Sherry. This is a lot
Thanks,
of fun.
Deb.